therapy and the use of psychedelics. So they could talk to you and find out if you're stable, ask you questions about your medical history, what kind of medications are you on, how are you feeling, what are you trying to achieve through this, and then work you through an experience. I mean, I think this could be enormously beneficial, like a
It already
massive.
has been.
Sure.
It already has been. I mean, that's, you know, we keep talking about psychedelic medicine all the time, but so much of this has been done. That's the really crazy thing. Ibogaine used to be a pharmaceutical in France, although it was used at lower doses that weren't psychedelic. There used to be an MDMA.
What were they using it for?
As like a tonic to stimulate people. It was called Lamborine, 8 milligram tablets.
What is an effective dose?
Threshold psychoactivity, in my experience, is about 20 milligrams of the hydrochloride salt. But
So they were microdosing.
they were mini microdosing.
Mini microdosing ibogaine.
They may have used multiple tablets. I don't know. If anyone is familiar with French historical literature relating to ibogaine, I have a little bit of it, but there isn't much. I mean, again, they used to use a psychedelic called Indopan as an antidepressant in the Soviet Union. In the United States, there was a drug called Monase, alpha-ethyltryptamine. It was used as an antidepressant. It's an MDMA-type serotonin releaser. And then, of course, the whole history of DPT-facilitated end-of-life therapy, LSD psychotherapy, on and on. Everything Shulgin's group did, using 2CB, MMDA, ibogaine. This was along with Claudio Naranjo, in order to facilitate psychotherapy. I mean, people not only were doing it, they were exploring all the different ways to do it, which compounds are best for which applications.
Do you have any experience with cacao?
Yes.
What is your experience in terms of the psychedelic effects or psychoactive effects?
It's mildly stimulating because of the theobromine content.
But does it mirror a small dose of MDMA or?
Not in my experience.
No, it was Kyle that was talking about that, right? Kyle Kingsbury. He was saying that in large doses that raw cacao has some sort of a mild MDMA-like effect.
I've heard people say that, and people will sometimes say that the presence of phenethylamine in cacao could account for that, but it's such a small amount, trace quantities, less than a milligram, and the active dose of phenethylamine is hundreds of milligrams or grams in order to achieve a psychoactive effect. So I think the effect that people do experience is probably mediated by theobromine, which is present in relatively high quantities. That's how it's named after the genus Theobroma.
And theobromine does what? How does it make you feel?
It's a caffeine type stimulant.
Oh, okay.
So when people say that chocolate contains caffeine, what they're really referring to theobromine.
And is that why it's deadly to dogs?
Yes, it is.
Huh. So it's theobromine that's doing it.
Yep.
Fascinating. So it's not actually caffeine.
No.
It's just a caffeine-like substance.
It's less potent than caffeine.
What was your experience like physically? How did you feel when you took this cacao? And how large a dose?
I mean, I used to eat it every day.
Like raw?
Yeah,
like
powder.
Powder.
Yeah,
powder?
I used to eat it every day, and yogurt, and
just as a health thing.
Yeah, as a health thing, and I liked the flavor of it, but I have never had an experience beyond, at most, a low-level stimulant experience. And I've also taken pure theobromine, and it is stimulating, but it requires like 500 milligrams to achieve an effect, if I remember correctly.
What about you ever fuck with nutmeg?
No, but I mean, it's a fascinating area. Of course, prisoners historically did it. Malcolm X did it.
Yeah.
And the essential oil of nutmeg contains myristicin, which is a precursor for the psychedelic amphetamine MMDA, not MDMA, but it's methoxy-MDA, and as well as elemicin, which is another psychedelic precursor, as well as there's, I think, one other, maybe even safrole, actually. I think it's safrole, elemicin, and myristicin. And Shulgin had a hypothesis. Again, Shulgin was actually, by training, a biochemist, not an organic chemist, although he spent his career doing organic chemistry. So he was very interested in these ideas of the body creating psychedelics. So he thought when you consume nutmeg oil that your body is emanating this double bond and creating a series of different amphetamines, and that's what accounts for the high. But in reality, people don't actually know.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So what kind of history of use does it have in terms of like people taking it for the psychoactive benefits?
I'm sure there is some ancient, or I would assume there is some ancient use of it, but it's mostly like a thing for teenagers and people in prison these days. It's illegal high. It's one of these things that you do when you don't have access to anything else. And most of the reports make it sound more like an anticholinergic deliriant type experience, more like taking a lot of Dramamine than like a classical psychedelic experience. But you can use that oil to make a lot of psychedelics. In a laboratory.
Wow. Now, history of use is also so fascinating to me when you talk about history of use, because there are certain cultures that really don't have a written history. They have oral history. So it's very difficult to determine when people started. What about peyote? What is the history of use of peyote? Because I remember reading something that kind of stunned me, that said that there's only like a couple hundred years of known use of peyote.
Yeah. Well, okay. So there's different histories, because peyote is used, it grows naturally over a relatively broad region stretching from the southern United States into, I believe, mostly northern Mexico. And so in the United States, the history is about 100 years old of the Native American church. It's recent. But
that's crazy. So 1918.
Something like that. Yes. It was a Comanche chief named Quanah Parker who spread the peyote religion across the United States. And it caught on because it's fantastic. Of course it caught on.
I've never experienced it. What is it like?
Well, again, it's another one of these plants that has mescaline, of course, but then it has these other accessory alkaloids that modulate the experience. So what's really interesting about peyote is it contains this chemical called peyotein. And peyotein, I have some pharmacy trade journals from like 1890 or something like that. No, it must be later than that. It must be maybe like 1915 or something like that, sometime around there. And they talk about like your pharmacy must have morphine, cocaine, and peyotein, the three substances every pharmacist needs. And peyotein was used as a hypnotic. It was used to induce sleep. But there's been very little research on it, none in the 21st century. I mean, this is like, was once considered a really valuable medicine. The issue is that it's a little bit tricky to synthesize, and it has to be extracted from this rare cactus, Lophophora diffusa. But that modulates the experience. You have so many different alkaloids, and it's very long lasting. It causes dramatic pupil dilation. It's extremely nauseating. I made an episode about peyote in the most recent season of my show, and I vomited so much that my nose started bleeding. It was some serious vomiting. And it's physically very, very punishing, more so than almost anything I've ever done.
In terms of the after effects, or while you're doing it?
While you're doing it, it's a heavy load on the body. So people always say this is not recreational or whatever, but it truly isn't. This is really a punishing experience. And on top of that, the Native American ceremonies often accentuate some of those punishing aspects of it, like water is conserved. You don't get to drink as much water as you want, but to emphasize the importance of water. In Mazatec salvia ceremonies, there's no water at all, which I think actually increases the absorption of the leaf into your mouth, because the natural reaction when you eat something disgusting is to wash it down with water. These are little things that people do impulsively without thinking that are going to change the nature of the experience. So anyway, you eat this cactus, it's incredibly nauseating and bitter, and then you have maybe a 12-hour hallucinatory, euphoric